Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. Amen. 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 Tell it on the mountain, go. 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 Amen. 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 shepherds kept their watching o'er silent flocks by night. Behold, throughout the heavens there shone a holy light. Tell it to me, amen, amen, amen.
Amen.
Go and tell it, amen, 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 amen. Go
Tell it on the mountain, go. 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 Tell it on the mountain,
go.
tell it on the mountain. Amen. Amen. Amen.
Amen. Play the drum, sing a song, on the coast of the Lord. Jesus risen, miracles, then the holiday is past. Dancing to and fro, drum beat a little drum, drum dum dum. Drum beat a little drum, drum dum dum. Drum beat a little drum, drum dum dum. Drum dum. Drum beat a little drum, drum dum dum. Drum beat a little drum, drum dum dum. Drum beat a little drum, drum dum dum. Drum a dum, drum a dum, drum dum dum. Play the drum, sing a song. Holy Ghost, that Spirit of Jesus raising miracles. Now the holiday is past. Light the candles long each night, till they all are burning bright. Casting off their happy glow, singing, dancing to and fro. Our God has finally come. Our God has finally come. Our God has finally come. Play the drums, sing a song, harness us not very long. Each day's racing very fast, then the holiday is past. Passing out their happy flow, singing, dancing to and fro. Rum, beat a little drum, rum, tum, tum. Rum, beat a little drum, rum, tum, tum. Rum, beat a little drum, rum, tum, tum. Rum, a tum, rum, a tum, rum, tum, tum. Rum, a tum, rum, tum, rum, a tum, rum, tum. Rum, tum, rum, tum, rum, tum, rum, tum, tum. Play the drums, sing a song, holiday clouds very low. Each day's racing very fast, then the holiday is past. Light the candles one each night, till they all are burning bright. Casting out their happy glow, singing, dancing to and fro.
Thumbnails.
Yeah. Okay, I'll be ready shortly. That's not what I see at all. There it is.
staffer, and there was this allegation that she also had an improper relationship with a Hill staffer as well. And that's a fair amount of stuff, regardless of the party, the naked, long party pictures.
This is a pure ethics matter.
Which are well.
Actually, just pointing out, she did admit that she had the relationship with the campaign staffer.
Right. The open question was made as would a male in her position. So there's nothing about this sexist about that. That would be the concept. But the thing is, now that she's resigning, we're not going to get to that point. And this allegation may just stand unanswered for God knows how long. And it's so two things can be true. If she did do that, which is in fact is not allegation, on either side, and the some of the public that have been seeing like the naked with the nature of social media and the upcoming election, Facebook stuff a lot of flat outs because the impacts of Russian interference in 2016. This week, the CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, announced his decision to stop all political advertising on Twitter around the world. He set out a tweet for his decision, of course, he mentions the CEO of Twitter, and it reads in part, quote, "This isn't about free expression. This is about paying for reach. And paying to increase the reach of political speech has significant ramifications that today's demographics of the community compared to Canada. It's worth stepping back and going through." Unquote. I mean, many people who have had this decision are now looking at Facebook and saying, okay, you're talking. I think that if Jack Dorsey had been the owner of Facebook,
$1 industry in terms of these political ads. So I think significant on the money part to Facebook and Twitter, but it's a step that a lot of Democrats want to see happen.
Jay wrote on our Facebook page, regarding Twitter and political advertising, the political problem on social media, especially Twitter, isn't political advertising. The problem is incendiary political speech, libel, lies, and blatant misrepresentation. Donald Trump has arguably amassed much of his social capital by currently violating the terms of service at Twitter and circulating the most vile and untruthful content of any public figure. Byron, I'd like you to react to that when we come back. I mean, I don't think Donald Trump needs to pay for political ads to have influence on Twitter, so I kind of wonder how far this will actually go. As we go to break, we'll be playing Friday by Ice Cube. You may remember the guy that played his dad in the Friday movies, John Witherspoon. He passed away this week at the age of 77. He had an amazing comedy career that spanned decades, including playing the voice of Granddad on the animated series The Boondocks. Stay close. Baghdadi gets cornered and kills himself. He died like a dog. He died like a coward. Also, big changes for Argentina. Protests take their toll in Chile and Iraq, and the resignation of Lebanon's prime minister does little to calm the crowds. The Friday News Roundup next hour on 1A.
Stay with us. That discussion is coming up in just 20 minutes on WAMU 88.5. Support for WAMU comes from the University of Maryland, dedicated to the power of fearless ideas. UMD discovers new knowledge, inspires Maryland pride, transforms the student experience, and turns imagination into innovation. UMD.edu. Visit Philadelphia. This fall, the Visit Philly overnight hotel package includes tickets to the National Constitution Center and Museum of the American Revolution to explore Philly's history. More at visitphilly.com. The National Philharmonic, who along with a rival from Sweden, will be performing Ali's greatest hits on Saturday, November 2nd at Strathmore. Ticket information at nationalphilharmonic.org. DC's, the unofficial homepage of the district, has an official newsletter. Get all the neighborhood news and events you need delivered straight to your inbox. To sign up, go to dcs.com/sign up today. Sunny today with a high near 53 tonight, clear skies and low at 37. It's 48 degrees in Northwest Washington. And from Capital One, offering Spark Cash Card for businesses. Committed to helping business owners turn purchases into meaningful investments that can help drive business forward. Capital One, what's in your wallet? More at CapitalOne.com. And from Noom, whose yellow, green, and red approach to categorizing food is designed to help people make improvements with the goal of losing weight and keeping it off for good. Learn more at Noom. NOOM.com.
Back to the roundup in just a moment, but first a word about our plans for Monday. And this goes back to Matt's comment that came up earlier about the American experiment being irreparably damaged. We're a year out from the election, and one recent poll found that nearly Americans say that a strong leader who doesn't have to bother with Congress over the elections would be fairly or very good. 1 in 5 responded saying that army rule would be fairly or very good. How do we renew America's faith in our political processes among those who have lost faith? Maybe that includes you. If you're not planning to vote next year, why not? Leave us a voicemail, 855-236-1A1A. How do we win back those who see our system as rigged or so bent out of shape that there's no point engaging with it at all? Tell us your story. 855-236-1A1A, or send us an audio file with our app, 1A Vox Pop. We'll share some of your stories Monday on 1A. Back now to the roundup with Anita Kumar, Swin Sutsang, and Byron York. Byron, let's pick up with that comment from Jay, who wrote on our Facebook page. The political problem on social media, especially Twitter, isn't political advertising. The problem is incendiary political speech, libel, lies, and blatant misrepresentation. Donald Trump has arguably amassed much of his social capital by consistently violating the terms of service at Twitter and circulating the most vile and untruthful content of any public figure. He has broken the terms of service quite a bit, including, I think, with that video where he took footage from the movie Kingsman: Secret Service and superimposed the logos of news organizations over the heads of people who named their massacres in the church. Like he tweeted that. He retweeted it. Really? Yes. I mean, he spread that tweet around. So, but even beyond that, if I had tweeted some of the things the president had, I would be banned for it.
Well, I think that Facebook almost has a Twitter almost has a presidential exception for this. That when Trump does something, it's by definition news, and they allow it to appear.
I thought you were going to quote Richard Nixon from the Frost interview when the president tweets that it's not illegal. I'm sorry. I thought that was where you were going.
On this ad thing, I have to say, my opinion, I'm on Facebook's side in this. Their position is basically that political speech is not only some of the most important speech speech in our national conversation. It's some of the most scrutinized speech in our national conversation, and that scrutiny should be done by journalists and political opponents and not a group of techies. At Facebook, I should say here, because I have to, that I was one of the small number of conservative journalists who went out to Palo Alto and had dinner at Zuckerberg's house, an off-the-record dinner. Another point that he makes, and made in his speech at Georgetown, is that it's hard to figure out what is a political ad. We have ads that are done by the Trump campaign or the Warren campaign, but there are tons of advocacy groups that post ads related to an election. It's a very, very large subject, and with lines that are very difficult to draw once you start drawing them.
And Swin, I think Facebook's leadership in particular has been much more, at least visibly engaged with Capitol Hill in terms of saying, we agreed we need to have a conversation. We agree there need to be regulations. We want to be part of the discussion so that something is not imposed on them that they dislike. He has been a little bit more reticent, but I don't know that Mark Zuckerberg's openness has gained him fans on Capitol Hill.
No, I don't think so. And that's a little interesting subplot of this whole Zuckerberg-related saga is if you look at what his image was in the mid-Obama era and the perception among a lot of establishment Democrats, I think, it was resoundingly more positive him as a tech giant ally. The group he helped started, it was heralded as something that would help push through immigration reform finally in the Obama era. Obviously, that did not happen. And a lot of this is because of her killings at over 16. I'm sorry, not all of it. Not all of it. But some of it is because a lot of Democrats, activists, politicians, what have you, do think that Facebook helped elect Donald Trump with the misinformation that was spread on him. And it has contributed somewhat, not entirely, but somewhat to Zuckerberg's image or perception as a villain among a good chunk of the progressive base, which is 100% contra to how he was perceived in the mid-Obama era. Now, they don't think he's a closet conservative. They don't think he's running around wearing a MAGA hat. But a lot of progressives who have already started to see big tech as a monopoly and a deleterious force that does need more regulation or oversight, has started to point to Zuckerberg more and more and more. And that trend will continue. And none of that is Zuckerberg gaining new friends on the right. But that's a whole different question.
Kay in Silver Spring, Maryland emailed, why is the CEO of Boeing not being considered as a criminal rather than just being asked to step down? Interesting question, Kay, but Boeing CEO Dennis Muilenburg was on Capitol Hill this week. He apologized Tuesday to the families of those who died in two 737 MAX jet crashes within the last year. He made the apology 1 year after the first crash, a Lion Air jetliner, as he testified in front of a Senate committee.
On behalf of myself and the Boeing Company, we are sorry, deeply and truly sorry. As a husband and father myself, I'm heartbroken by your losses.
Muilenburg also appeared before a House committee on Wednesday, and he said in part, quote, regulators around the world should approve the return of the MAX to the skies only after they have applied the most rigorous scrutiny and are completely satisfied as to the plane's safety, unquote. This is the first time that Boeing executives have testified since the Lion Air Ethiopian Airlines jetliners crashed. 20 people who lost loved ones in the Ethiopian Airlines crash were at the Tuesday hearing. Let's back up to some of the politics surrounding the president, Anita, with one comment from John that I'd like to get your reaction to. John wrote on our Facebook page, it's becoming rather clear that the Republicans are afraid of their own base and will happily throw themselves on a live grenade to protect this president. In the end, does it matter? The actual precedent that buried Trump is state tax fraud crimes in New York.
Well, I mean, it's true about the Republicans here. I mean, no matter what you say, no matter what has happened, what controversy over the last 2.5 years, the president seems to remain popular with a certain segment of the society. His supporters are sticking with him. And so you see Republicans on Capitol Hill that feel that they need to stick with the president. Those that haven't stuck with him, are retiring, or they are going to be primaried, and they sort of know that political future. So people have stuff with him. What the person is referring to on the tax fraud, I think there's a lot of investigations that the president is going through. I mean, we're so caught up in Washington with the impeachment and the Ukraine call, we forget. I did a story that there were 15 outside investigations into Donald Trump all over the country on taxes, on his business, on so many other things, and some of those are criminal investigations. All of those are criminal investigations. He has lawsuits, so there's a lot more we might see in the next year that is outside of Washington. And the caller is correct, or the person that's writing is correct, that any of those things can come true. And I don't know that we have all that information yet.
Well, briefly, Byron, even if those did, come to light, there's still a question as to whether or not you can even charge a sitting president. So even then, it would have to wait until after he's out of
I
office.
do think through all the investigations of the past 3 years, among some Democrats, there's been this belief that there's always something big just around the corner. I mean, this collusion is really huge, and then when it's not turning out to be quite as huge, this New York stuff is really big. SBMI is really going to get it. How about emoluments? How about these other business deals? How about Ukraine? Now Ukraine is the really big thing. I think that there's almost a Roadrunner Wile E. Coyote characteristic to this, and so far nothing has turned out to be exactly what they hoped. Now we're in the middle of perhaps the biggest project yet, with the House actually impeaching him, but so far it hasn't really worked the way they hoped.
We should note on the West Coast that the National Weather Service has issued its first ever extreme red flag warning this week as parts of California continue to burn. Fires are burning up and down the state, fueled by rushing winds. They came within a few feet of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley. That fire is still burning, but the library plans to be open today. Reports suggest that firefighters are starting to get a handle on the Kincaid fire, which is north of San Francisco. Yesterday, a new fire broke out northwest of Los Angeles in Ventura County. Forecasters expect strong winds and low humidity in Southern California. Parts of Northern California woke up to a freeze warning. The temperature should still rise above normal this weekend. We should also talk about Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi before we go. On Sunday, the president shared new details of the raid that killed the ISIS leader. Here's part of what he said in a televised address from the White House.
The U.S. personnel were incredible. I got to watch much of it. No personnel were lost in the operation, while a large number of Baghdadi's fighters and companions were killed with him. He died after running into a dead-end tunnel, whimpering and crying and screaming all the way.
Now, Anita, some of the national security officials, including the defense secretary, Mark Esper, have called some of the details of that into question. What do we actually know about what happened?
Well, you're exactly right. There are U.S. officials who are saying they don't know those specific details that the president was talking about, that how he acted like a coward at the end and he whimpered like a dog, I think he said. So those details aren't known. What we do know is he was killed. We do know some of those details that the president said are exactly true, but this is a president we've seen over and over who likes to have things as a sort of theatrical. He likes to embellish. He likes to tell a good story. He likes to be on TV telling that. And so, although it has made some of his officials uncomfortable, some of the details that he's revealed and the way he reveals it, that is the way he continues to do it.
And Swin, one of the other aspects of this in announcing al-Baghdadi's death is that the president kind of departed from his standard criticism of the intelligence community. He praised their work, but he also said he's dealing with, in his words, people who aren't very intelligent having to do with intel. So a little bit of a pullback, but still not completely.
But other Trumpian flourishes that he couldn't help but not divert from when he was giving this pretty important national address wasn't just what you just talked about, but he also took time to say that ISIS is pretty good at social media, but not as great as Donald Trump is. And he also referenced multiple times, not just one, but multiple best-selling books of his, and how right he was in one of them, allegedly, about Osama bin Laden before the 9/11 attacks happened. So during the course of this, we have multiple senior administration officials, both on the record and otherwise, saying that they have no idea where the president got the crying and whimpering details, alleged details of Baghdadi's violent passing. And we have him pimping both his best-selling books from years and decades past and how great he is at Twitter.com. I can't think of any other way this particular president would have announced the death of the ISIS leader.
Byron, one more thing we should note. On Wednesday, Senate Finance Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley of Iowa and Homeland Security Committee Chairman Ron Johnson of Wisconsin asked the Attorney General to make the DOJ's Russia investigation findings public. Why did they ask for that briefly?
Well, this came after news that this is the John Durham investigation. It turned into a criminal investigation that Durham was using the grand jury to get evidence. And I think there's a fear. There's a balance between a criminal procedure and public disclosure. And most Republicans on the Hill want public disclosure. And when something becomes a criminal case, people lawyer up. There's a grand jury involved. There's secrecy involved. And that's exactly the opposite of what a number of Republicans want. I think they don't want to hang anybody. They want the public to know what happened.
Before we go, the impeachment process that we've been talking about today is rightly being called historic. But the Washington Nationals rewrote some of the history books on Wednesday night. An estimated 27 million people watched them beat the Houston Astros in Game 7 to win the World Series. DC has not won in 95 years, back when a team called the Senators took the title. This year's championship broke a lot of records. The Nationals had the worst start ever for a championship team. They'd lost 31 of their first 50 games. This was the first World Series where the visiting team won every game. The Nats also had the league's oldest roster, with an average age of about 31. Washington's Fernando Rodney is the oldest active player in the majors. He's 42. Some of the Nats call themselves Los Viejos, which is Spanish for the old guys. And the Nats have a strong Latino presence. Their victory song is Calma, a reggaeton hit celebrating the beauty of Puerto Rico. The team's other anthem is the walk-on music for Gerardo Parra, Baby Shark. You can expect to hear that at tomorrow's parade, whether you like it or not. The celebration will run along the National Mall from the Washington Monument to the Capitol. Baseball has a way of sparing us from the crises of the day. Back in 1998, I remember the home run race between Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa giving me a break from President Clinton's scandal over Monica Lewinsky. Many New Yorkers took pride in the first game after 9/11. The Mets beat the Braves 3-2. The Yankees made it to that World Series, where a tattered flag from Ground Zero waved over the crowd in Game 3. This impeachment is, look, whatever may happen with Congress and President Trump, we'll bring you the latest. But there's always more to life than politics. And as vital as it is for us to keep a close eye on Washington, sometimes it really is okay to look away. Anita Kumar is Politico's White House correspondent. Anita, thanks for spending the hour with us.
Thanks.
Asawin Subsang, White House reporter for the Daily Beast. Thank you, Swin.
Anytime.
And Byron York, chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner. Thanks, Byron.
Thanks for having me.
Please do subscribe to 1A's podcast on whatever app you like. If you like the show, please rate us and write a review. All the links to listen are at npr.org/1A. Our lead audio engineer is Jake Cherry, with technical help from Josephine Leoni. Our digital producers are Gabrielle Keeley and Chris Vistano. To learn more about them and the team, visit the1a.org. This program comes to you from WAMU, part of American University in Washington, distributed by NPR. Until we meet again, I'm Joshua Johnson. Thank you so much for listening, and enjoy your weekend and the Victory Parade. This is 1A.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Home Advisor, committed to helping homeowners find the right pros for their home projects. Homeowners can read reviews, book appointments, and check cost guides for home projects at homeadvisor.com or on the mobile app. From Capital One, committed to reimagining banking, offering savings and checking accounts that can be opened from anywhere. Capital One, what's in your wallet? Capital One, NA. And from the listeners who support this NPR station.
We're a year out from the election. Polling suggests a significant number of people are through engaging with a political system that is bent badly out of shape. And whatever your politics, that's not good for the country. How do we renew America's faith in its political process? And is it too late to win some people back? Next time on 1A.
Listen Monday from 10 to 11 on WAMU 88.5. Support for WAMU comes from Blue Cross Blue Shield Association, an association of independent, locally operated Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies. Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies believe everyone should have access to health care, no matter who you are or where you live. Povo de Chão, now featuring the Festa Brazil, offering Brazilian cuts like prime lamb steak and picanha sirloin, and the market table. Locations at Penn Quarter, Tysons, or Bethesda. Reservations at Povo.com. The Sanju Kevon South Foundation, dedicated to helping people help themselves through improved access to information. This is WAMU Washington, your listener-supported NPR news station from American University. In HD at 88.5 at WRAU 88.3 Ocean City, and live at WAMU.org. It's 11 o'clock.
ISIS loses one leader and names another. President Trump told the world that he died crying and whimpering. What happens now in the fight on terror? From WAMU and NPR in Washington, this is 1A. Hey there, I'm Joshua Johnson. Today on 1A, it's the Friday News Roundup. Some are calling Mr. Trump's account of the attack that killed Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi into question. They include the top U.S. commander in the Middle East. Latin America made lots of news this week, from the ongoing crisis at the border to presidential elections to protests in Chile that are disrupting its international relationships. Also, more protests are growing in parts of the Middle East, and the UK has another big decision besides Brexit: who to vote for in a snap election next month. We'd love to hear from you. Comment on our Facebook page or tweet us at 1A.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Trump holds a rally in Mississippi tonight. NPR's Debbie Elliott reports his appearance is just ahead of next week's Mississippi governor's election. Trump's appearance in Tupelo is intended to get out the vote for Republican Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves. In his speech to business leaders, Reeves said a vote for him is like a vote for Trump.
If you believe that our country is headed in the right direction and you support President Trump, next Tuesday is critically important.
Reeves is in a tight race for governor with the lone Democrat to hold statewide office in conservative Mississippi, Attorney General Jim Hood.
I have views that agree with Republicans and some with Democrats. So, I've tried to make sure that everybody understands that I'm going to be a moderate.
Republican Governor Phil Bryant is term limited. Debbie Elliott, NPR News, Jackson, Mississippi. House lawmakers won't question any witnesses in the impeachment inquiry today. On Thursday, the House adopted formal rules for the inquiry, including guidelines for public hearings and document releases. Iraqis are protesting on the streets of Baghdad today to denounce government corruption. NPR's Jane Arap is in the Iraqi capital, where she says demonstrators and those in power were addressed in today's weekly sermon by Shiite cleric, the Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani.
In this message, he seems to be telling protesters that he continues to support them, that they should remain peaceful, but he's also telling the government that they can't use force against those protesting, and that they need to respect the will of the people.
NPR's Jane Arap. The protests are the largest in Iraq since the fall of Saddam Hussein in 2003. Google is buying Fitbit for $2.1 billion, both companies announced today. NPR's Amy Held reports the internet giant is attempting to flex its muscle in the crowded wearable technology field.
Alphabet-owned Google says it will pay $7.35 per share for the San Francisco-based Fitbit. Fitbit is a pioneer in the fitness tracking market, but has struggled to compete with Apple and its popular Apple Watch. The deal could strengthen Google's hardware business and give it a stronghold in wearables, but it could also draw more criticism for Google. The internet giant is facing several investigations for being too big and too powerful. Shares in both companies rose on news of the acquisition, Well, regulators and Fitbit shareholders must first approve the deal. Both companies are facing consumers increasingly concerned about privacy. Fitbit says the health and wellness data of its users won't be used for Google Ads. Amy Held, NPR News. On Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 245 points at 27,291, nearly 1%. The Nasdaq is up 71 points. The S&P 500 is up 23. This is NPR. Authorities in Contra Costa County, California, are reporting a mass shooting. The county sheriff says that 4 people have been killed and an unidentified number of others injured in the shooting. The gunfire occurred in the city of Orinda, just east of Oakland. Open enrollment in the Affordable Care Act marketplaces begins today. NPR's Selena Simmons-Duffin reports this year, healthcare.gov looks a bit like President Obama thought it would 6 years ago.
Healthcare.gov had a rocky start. It just didn't work very well. Relatively few people were able to initially sign up. Meantime, Obama was saying this in the Rose Garden back in 2013.
Just visit healthcare.gov, and there you can compare insurance plans side by side, the same way you'd shop for a plane ticket on Kayak or a TV on Amazon.
This year, consumers will see star ratings next to most plans based on survey of plan customers, just like that TV on Amazon. The Trump administration has celebrated this and other improvements to the website. At the same time, it has opted not to defend the Affordable Care Act in federal court in a case that threatens its very existence. Open enrollment in the federal exchange runs until mid-December. Selena Simmons-Duffin, NPR News.
Some customers in the eastern U.S. don't have power today. It was knocked out by strong storms that pushed through states from the Carolinas to Maine on Thursday. Forecasters issued tornado warnings in some areas of the mid-Atlantic. Earlier today, the National Weather Service warned of temperatures near freezing from Alabama to Ohio. I'm Corva Coleman, NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors with Parasite, a dark comedy thriller about 2 very different families whose fates cross in a tale of class, greed, and deception. Now playing in select cities. Parasite-movie for more theater info.
It's 11:06. You're listening to WAMU 88.5. I'm Jerry Mitchell. On the next Fresh Air, we listen back to an interview with film producer Robert Evans, who died Saturday. Evans challenged Hollywood in the 1960s by hiring young writers and directors like Roman Polanski and Francis Ford Coppola. He produced films Chinatown, Rosemary's Baby, and The Godfather. Join us today at 1 for Fresh Air on WAMU 88.5.
This is 1A. Happy Friday. I'm Joshua Johnson in Washington. ISIS's Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi sought the annihilation of those that he and his movement deemed impure. Now he and his heir apparent are dead, killed in back-to-back attacks by U.S. forces this week. Here's how President Trump described Baghdadi's final moments.
He was screaming, crying, and whimpering. And he was scared out of his mind.
Those details have been called into question, but ISIS has confirmed deaths, warning America, quote, do not be happy, unquote. Meanwhile, political turmoil has rocked South America, and widespread protests in the Middle East has led to some talk of an Arab fall. Lots to get to today on the Friday News Roundup, and joining us around the table are Jennifer Williams, the foreign editor of Vox and co-host of the podcast Worldly. Jennifer, welcome back to the Roundup.
Thanks for having me.
Fernando Pizarro, the Washington correspondent for Univision. Fernando, welcome back.
Happy to be back.
And Abdurrahim Fukara, the Washington bureau chief for Al Jazeera. Abdurrahim, good to have you with us.
Delighted to be here.
It'd be good to have your questions and thoughts about what's happening around the world, so email us 1a@wamu.org, comment on our Facebook page, or tweet us at 1a.
Last night, the United States brought the world's #1 terrorist leader to justice. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is dead.
It's been less than a week since the president made that announcement, but we've learned a lot more about the terrorist leader's death and its implications for the region. Jennifer Williams, let me start with you. Just give us the basic bio on who Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was and why his death matters.
Sure. So he was the caliph of the ISIS caliphate. They declared this caliphate, and he who did that, standing in a mosque in Mosul, Iraq, he basically declared that ISIS was back on the scene. His background: he has a master's degree in Quranic studies. He did his master's thesis on really obscure Quranic interpretation. He was a soccer player. He, was very religious as a young man. Then the Iraq War happens, the U.S. invasion of Iraq. He gets caught up in that. He ends up being arrested and imprisoned in Camp Boka, which was a U.S.-run Iraqi prison. Kind of became a jihadist training ground. A lot of people, connected up and made connections. And when he got out, he basically took over a fledgling organization that was still kind of the remnants of a previous Al-Qaeda organization in Iraq. Ends up basically reconstituting this organization. You have Syria's kind of civil war starts. He's able to basically capitalize on the chaos there. Ends up exploding back onto the scene, taking over entire swaths of Iraq, parts of Syria, and launching this global caliphate that he described. He was the figurehead, he was the commander, he was a very important figure, and his death, at least very much from a symbolic perspective, is a huge blow to ISIS.
Now, President Trump said that in Baghdadi's final moments, he was whimpering and crying, but a top U.S. military commander, General Frank McKenzie, has tried to kind of slow down or temper that version of events.
Stay on the ground. You can deduce what kind of person he is based on that activity. So that would be just my empirical observation of what he did. I'm not able to confirm anything else about his last seconds. I just can't confirm that one way or another.
General Frank McKenzie also shared video of that raid. Abdurrahim, what do we know for sure about how the operation to get al-Baghdadi was carried out?
Well, we know that he detonated himself at the end of the process. President Donald Trump mentioned him being captured, and then he blew himself up, which doesn't seem to add up. But at the end of the day, whether what we heard from President Trump or what we heard from others, such as McKenzie and the Defense Secretary Esper, it all goes towards saying that it was a highly complex operation, and it was highly coordinated. It was a little interesting and puzzling that President Donald Trump thanked various other players who had something to do with this. He mentioned Russia, he mentioned Turkey, he mentioned the Kurds, but he also mentioned Syria. And it's very hard to know what exactly he meant by Syria. Did he mean the president of Bashar al-Assad? What we're hearing from the State Department is that the situation in terms of relations between the Trump administration and the regime of Bashar al-Assad, if that was what the president meant, remained the same. There are no direct contacts with the regime of Bashar al-Assad. He mean some sort of faction of Syrian fighters pro-US. It's very unclear. But one thing is clear, is that Baghdadi is gone, and that it has played out in so many different ways, both inside the United States and outside the United States. The event came smack in the middle of huge protests in various parts of the Middle East. It did knock news of those protests off the radar in the Middle East. It managed to knock off the radar stuff that was happening here in the United States, in the United States Congress, with regard to the Ukraine situation. But we know Baghdadi is gone, and as Jennifer said, on a symbolic level, it's huge. But in terms of what will the actual impact of it be on history and politics in the Middle East, it remains to be unseen. It remains to be seen.
Worth noting that the operation to take Baghdadi took place in kind of a northwest corner of Syria, in sort of the Aleppo area, right near the Syria-Turkey border. But again, it's not entirely clear what role Syria and Turkey played, whether they just allowed U.S. troops to move in, or how that worked.
On the whimpering and crying issue that the president insisted so much upon when he made the announcement. We were just talking about this a little bit before the show. And the question is whether it is theatrical or not. Did he exaggerate or not? That is still, up for question. But he had one message as part of his speech in which he said, I want people to know this because I want any followers in Western countries or in the United States, this affected youth that may want to be followers of the Islamic State, to know how he died. So whether he had a point in this exaggeration or not, he may have with this message. If not, it was just typical Trump. Jennifer?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say, we tend to rarely give Trump credit for much because he doesn't necessarily deserve much credit for a lot of things. But I will say, in this respect, this was a very successful counterterrorism raid. Right. I mean, he didn't operate and orchestrate it himself, but he is the commander in chief, and he did get the final, sign off for this raid. And it was incredibly complex, like Abdul Rahim said. It involved fewer than, I think, 100 U.S. forces. 8 helicopters took off from, a base near Erbil, Iraq, and flew in. They had to coordinate with Russian and Turkish airspace, which is, one of the reasons why they think, Russia and Trump thanks Russia and Turkey.
Basically flying across the northern edge of Syria from Iraq.
Exactly, right. And then, they land in the dead of night, which, most raids like this do happen at night because it's harder to see, I think people know. But, it was this really kind of, the timing was perfect. They knew he was there with this, percentage of certainty, but you never know for sure, right? Things can go very wrong. There were no U.S. Fatalities. They were able to evacuate some of the children, besides the 2 that Baghdadi chose to kill. They ended up, demolishing the site. They got a lot of hopefully useful documentation and sources of resources out of the compound. They were able to exploit. They stayed in about 2 hours before they blew up the entire compound. So in terms of a big counterterrorism raid, if we give President Obama credit for the Osama bin Laden raid, which I think people do, and rightfully so, then I think it's equally fair to give President Trump some credit for the Baghdadi raid, because it was very successful and very, important.
Let's get to some of your questions. Peter emailed, is it not emblematic of a worrisome lack of intelligence that the West seems to know virtually nothing about Baghdadi's successor? Abdurrahim, the president, it's worth noting, tweeted this morning around 9:40, ISIS has a new leader. We know exactly who he is. And ISIS announced that they had a new leader. We know his name. We know that he exists. But what more do we know about him?
Well, we know very little, except that we know something very important, at least one thing very important about him. We know one thing very important that confirms something that we have always known about ISIS. So the leader, the caliph, as Jennifer said in her opening remarks, in early Islamic jurisprudence, the leader of the emir, the leader of the faithful, has to have certain qualities. And one of those qualities, one of those conditions that he has to fulfill, is that he has to be from the tribe of the Prophet Muhammad. The tribe of the Prophet Muhammad, Quraysh. This guy is now, his name is Qurayshi. So we have that established. And that has, from the perspective of ISIS and the supporters of ISIS, that has a huge significance in terms of the legitimacy that he brings to the job of leading ISIS, particularly that he's come to replace not just anyone, he's come to replace al-Baghdadi, who did announce the rise of the caliphate when he did in Mosul.
We'll pick up with this as we continue the Friday News Roundup with Abdurrahim Fukara of Al Jazeera, Fernando Pizarro of Univision, and Jennifer Williams of Vox. Jacob tweeted, what capabilities does ISIS have? Are they still active? We'll talk a bit more about the future of ISIS and then move on to a lot of news out of Latin America when we continue. I'm Joshua Johnson, and you're listening to 1A from WANU and NPR.
Michaela LaFrac here with a bit of a scoop. What's with Washington? The podcast is back.
And we've got an amazing season lined up for you. In our first episode, we'll be diving straight into a DC staple, go-go. Go-go is a verb, it's a noun, it's a place, it's a community. We'll discuss the history of DC's favorite music and listen to some of its biggest hits. All that and more on What's with Washington. Listen wherever you get your podcasts. If you're in the federal civil service, the foreign service, or a member of the armed forces of the U.S. or overseas, we hope you'll support WAMU through this year's combined federal campaign. We're number 91855. And thanks. Support for WAMU comes from JK Moving Services, an independently operated moving company that moves people out of hunger with its volunteer-run JK Community Farm, donating fruit, vegetables, and protein to area food banks. JKMoving.com. Visit Philadelphia. This fall, the Visit Philly Overnight Hotel Package includes tickets to the National Constitution Center and Museum of the American Revolution to explore Philly's history. More at visitphilly.com. Sunny today with a high near 53 tonight. Clear skies and a low of 37. It's currently 49 degrees in Northwest Washington. It's 11:20. Support for NPR comes from this station and from Capital One, offering the Spark Cash Card for businesses. Committed to helping business owners turn purchases into meaningful investments that can help drive business forward. Capital One, what's in your wallet? More at CapitalOne.com. And from Noom, whose yellow, green, and red approach to categorizing food is designed to help people make improved meal choices, with the goal of losing weight and keeping it off for good. Learn more at Noom, NOOM.com.
This is 1A. I'm Joshua Johnson. It's the Friday News Roundup with Jennifer Williams of Vox, Fernando Pizarro of Univision, and Abdurrahim Fukara of Al Jazeera. We welcome your questions and thoughts on the week's top stories from around the world. Comment on our Facebook page, tweet us at 1A, or email 1A@WAMU.org. Jennifer, I wonder if you could answer Jacob's question. Jacob asked, what capabilities does ISIS have? Are they still active?
Sure, they are still active, but not in the way that they were previously or at their peak. So they're still, the estimates vary, but a few thousand to as many as maybe 10, 15,000. But I think those estimates are perhaps a bit high. But there are at least several thousand active ISIS fighters. But what ISIS looks like now is very different. It's much more of a kind of insurgency in terms of blending in with the population rather than holding territory, right? They don't have access to the same resources. Those oil fields that President Trump has talked about in Syria that the U.S. is now going to defend, those were previously, around 2011, were held by ISIS. They used that to smuggle oil to sell to everyone from the Assad regime and beyond, which gave them a lot of resources. They obviously controlled huge swaths of Iraq, which also gave them a lot of resources. So, they used to be this big, powerful kind of terrorist juggernaut, but that was never really sustainable. They didn't have any allies. They don't have any natural allies. They don't have any, any big international backers. So it was only a matter of time that the caliphate, as they described it, was going to fail. So now we're in that kind of later phase. They do still have capabilities of carrying out terrorist attacks that are, fairly devastating, mostly in the region. They're less, it seems, able to inspire the kind of broader international terror attacks, in part because, a lot of their attraction in, the early days was that they were this big, powerful kind of movement, that, they were on the rise, and now they just look kind of like a bunch of losers. They literally lost their caliphate. I'm okay with calling them losers. I don't know, that's just me. But, they just lost their leader. That's a huge blow. Whether or not he was involved in the day-to-day command is a different question. But this new leader that we're talking about, Abu Ibrahim al-Qurayshi, he's mostly an unknown, not just, the earlier question about is it, a commentary on the West that we don't know who he is. Most people in ISIS probably don't know who he is, according to most analysts I've spoken to. And, that's going to be potentially a problem for ISIS because they're going to have to build up authority for this person. Why should I follow this random guy I've never heard of?
Alice tweeted, listening to Trump describe Baghdadi's death is disgusting. Our commander-in-chief denigrating the death of an enemy, no matter how evil he may be, dishonors the office and our nation. And Donald asked a question, Abdurrahim, that I've heard come up quite a bit, and I'd like you to answer this one quickly, and then we'll keep going. Donald tweeted, is there any truth to reports that Trump was actually playing golf when the ISIS leader was killed, and the photo of him and the generals was staged after the fact?
I mean, there was obviously some back and forth about this. The operation happened about 3:30 in the afternoon. He was reported to have left the golf course at 3:30 in the afternoon that day. But we have seen the picture. I've seen people saying that it's been doctored. Very few people have said that. But you know, at the end of the day, I think his most important message, which is about his legacy, that on his watch, al-Baghdadi was killed, and nobody can dispute that.
Let's turn now to Latin America, starting with the ongoing protests in Chile. They forced the government to pull out of hosting two major international gatherings. One was a big trade summit. The other was a climate conference. Fernando, you are Chilean. Could you give us your perspective on the latest on the protest? I don't think that Chile has had this kind of unrest in a very long time.
No, not in a very long time. Well, Sebastián Piñera this week, the president had to suspend APEC, which is the Asia Pacific Economic Summit, which, as you said, important trade meeting. President Trump had said repeatedly that he would attend. We will get into that later. There's also suspended, canceled the UN-backed climate summit. It was to take place in December. Now Spain apparently has agreed or offered to host it. It's a big hit for the image of the country, for the diplomatic image, for the public image of a country that until very recently was considered a model, considered a almost developed country, part of the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. A lot of countries always listed on. Now for exactly 2 weeks. They started the Thursday before, but they really got back 2 weeks ago. And it's basically a general discontent over a lot of things. It started over a minor, we could say 4 cents of a dollar hike in the metro fares. But then they went on to burn or destroy or severely damage 70 of 153 metro stations in Latin America's largest and most modern metro system. But there's a lot of discontent over things that have been happening over a lot of years. There's a gross inequality in Chile. About 1% of the population has 25% of the wealth. The poverty has come down to 7%, but from 30% 30 years ago. But there are low pensions. Some salaries are not enough. A fully privatized pension system that has left a lot of people with very, very low pensions, low salaries, privatized health, privatized water supply. There's been hikes in electricity, then collusion by huge conglomerates in the prices of toilet paper, chicken, medications, and those crimes, financial crimes, have gone unpunished. There's been corruption, misappropriation of funds at the highest levels of the army, of the cops. There's been extremely high salaries for the members of Congress. So there's, in general, a lot of discontent, and it has accumulated.
So of the list of demands that the protesters have, what's at the top of the list? I mean, do they want new leadership at the top? Do they want laws changed?
There is a demand for Piñera to resign. He had a major shakeup in his cabinet, but it's mostly still a center-right cabinet. So I don't think there's a chance right now for him to resign or political instability to get as far as a change of government. It could happen. They're calling for a constitutional assembly as well. Now, I have to say that in Santiago particularly, there's always protests about something. There's always some march, and they tend to get a little bit out of hand. There's always the violent element that destroys bus stops. But this has been widespread. This has been nationwide. And they've been targeting supermarkets. They've been targeting pharmacies. They've been targeting hardware stores that are all parts of these big, enormous chains that represent this wealth. And basically that it's not spreading to the rest of the country.
So there's this trade conference that was canceled in Santiago. China's President Xi was supposed to meet with Chile's president on trades. So it's kind of there's economic movers on both ends. It seems like you have these big movers at the top, and then people saying we're too low down from the bottom. You need to be more
absolutely, yeah. There's this sensation feeling from a lot of Chileans that things are not trickling down. Trickle down economics. That sounds familiar, right?
Abdurrahim?
I
mean, I find it extraordinary that in a country such as Chile, where military rule ended some 20 years ago, 23 years ago, and that memory, at least in the minds of young Chileans, was not as present as it is in the memory of their parents, for example. I find it extraordinary that 23 years later, the president of Chile actually he declared a state of emergency. And I know that we're going to talk about the Middle East later on, so I just want to take an opportunity for a minute to say this. You know, in the Middle East, there's always been this conversation about Arab unity. What happens in one Arab country ends up happening in another country, good, bad, or ugly. It seems to me that it's the same conversation that's been going on in Latin America. To what extent Latin American countries are similar, to what extent they have the same destiny, to what extent, there is a prospect for Latin American unity. But at the end of the day, when one Latin American country, especially when it's a major Latin American country, is sick, there's a historical pattern to this. You can almost be sure that other Latin American countries are also experiencing, if not the same sickness, something similar to it. We're seeing Argentina, we're seeing Brazil, we're seeing Bolivia. There's a whole wave basically sweeping through the region now at a time when there's increased skepticism about the future of democracy, not just in Latin America, but serious questions being raised here in the United States, and that's very important to Latin Americans.
We actually got a comment about Bolivia. Tom tweeted, "Don't forget the oft-overlooked Bolivia and the chaos over Evo's attempts to fight democracy." So there have been violent clashes in Bolivia as well, with supporters and opponents of the incumbent President Evo Morales. The election results are disputed. He says he won the vote on October 20th. There have been questions about voting irregularities. The Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, has urged Bolivian authorities to hold a second round of voting. I'm not sure, Fernando, how that stalemate is going to break.
Well, the United States, Colombia, Argentina, Brazil have asked for a runoff. The OAS, the Organization of American States, is sending 30 experts. They're going to audit the election over the next 12 days. As you said, on October 20th, Evo Morales, who has been in office since 2006, and it's very important to note this, he is the first indigenous president in a country that has an overwhelming indigenous population that always felt underrepresented. But he is asking for a fourth term, which is already itself a controversy. So he needed, or the winner of this election needed 10 percentage points difference to avoid a runoff. So initially, when the exit polls came out, he didn't have a 10% over Carlos Mesa, his more centrist rival, who's also a former president. But now the results are 47.07 for Evo Morales and a 36.5 for Mesa, so then he would avoid the runoff. But these results are being contested. So this is the issue right now, and there have been some deaths in Bolivia as well over these protests, and this is going to go on for a while until anybody is willing to accept the results.
Let's go a little closer to home and update the crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border. U.S. immigration authorities detained a record number of families, according to new government data, families and unaccompanied children who were trying to cross the border last year. Mexico is also having a surge in families crossing the border fleeing north from Central America. Tell us more about what's going on there and what's being done about it.
Well, Customs and Border Protection, CBP, the acting commissioner, Mark Morgan, this week released a lot of numbers. 2 weeks ago, they released the fact that almost 1 million migrants, 907,000, had been detained and were considered inadmissible at the border. Now, the numbers about families is in the last fiscal year, there were 473,000 family units, and about of those, 76,000 kids were unaccompanied minors that came on their own to the border. These are record numbers.
76,000 children came to the border by themselves.
Yeah, on what is considered an unaccompanied minor, that they are coming with no adult supervision, it's no adult relative, yes. And this is a record-breaking figure. And no matter what we say about what the policy may be, these are record-breaking numbers that the United States is trying to curtail through these third country agreements that has been trying to sign and being successful, at least with El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, not so with Mexico.
Yeah, Jennifer, do we have a sense of how well that's going in terms of curbing immigration? I mean, obviously, the administration's tried to curb immigration at our border through a number of measures, trying to restrict the routes that migrants and asylum seekers take to remain in the U.S. Do we have a sense of how that's working so far?
Well, if the numbers are anything, it's not, right? I think part of the problem is that, the way the administration has gone about doing this and trying to get Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, and Mexico, but particularly in the Golden Triangle, those three countries, to agree to these third country agreements is by basically economic and aid coercion, by threatening to cut off U.S. aid or by actually cutting off U.S. aid. And U.S. aid isn't just this blanket aid in these countries, right? The aid programs that are involved are meant are very closely tied to the immigration problem. They are meant to help do things like, stamp out corruption, to build infrastructure, to build good governance. They're not perfect programs, obviously, but the money isn't just blanket money. It is meant to actually solve some of the deeper underlying problems that are driving these push factors you talk about in immigration, that are pushing people to come. And by cutting those programs off, and by dramatically reducing aid just in general, that is, thereby actually further propelling these kind of conditions that are causing this. So, on the one hand, you have them, trying to push to make these countries, crack down harder or control migrants. But if they could have done that, if they wanted, if they were able to get people to want to stay in those countries, they would have already done so. And that's the problem here. And I think, you also see that, on the U.S. and the homeland side, the whole fight of the border wall is kind of this weird sideshow where, if that much attention, that all the attention is being paid to that wall, were actually paid to, hiring more lawyers, hiring more, staffers at the border who can actually process. That's a lot of what this backup is.
The immigration infrastructure.
Exactly. Is that, these numbers are huge and we don't have the infrastructure to actually process people, which is why you see these, babies in cages, which is why you see these, facilities that CBP and ICE are controlling, because, they have to process these people, but they end up in this long backlog where it could be 2 years before they're going to get to, go in front of the judge to see if their asylum claims are valid or, will be granted. And so you end up having to put them somewhere. And so that's kind of just perpetuates this nightmare at the border.
Fernando, one more Latin America story before we move on. The Trump administration announced this week that it's extending temporary protected status, which is protection from deportation, to more than 200,000 Salvadorans who are living and working in the U.S. It's part of this larger cooperation deal between the U.S. and El Salvador over border security and information sharing. And it reverses a decision from last year to end TPS for Salvadorans. Is this a bargaining chip in those negotiations? What is this?
If I have time to explain, it's sort of. It's a technical extension, but not a political extension of TPS, and I'll explain. So this week, the El Salvador president Nayib Bukele went on Twitter, on video, standing next to the U.S. ambassador, explaining that they had extended TPS. However, what ended up happening is DHS and El Salvador signed security and cooperation agreement on the border and aviation security, and what they have actually technically done is extend the work permit of TPS beneficiaries for El Salvador till January 4th, 2021, and then 365 days after the end of the lawsuits against the administration for ending these programs. So technically, they are extending the program because they extended the work permit. And politically, the U.S. government has not extended TPS.
Much more to discuss with Fernando Pizarro of Univision, Jennifer Williams of Fox, and Abdurrahim Fukar of Al Jazeera. Earlier this week, we noted that the internet turned 50 this week. The two biggest selling records at that time were I Can't Get Next to You by the Temptations and this song that eventually replaced them at the top of the charts, Suspicious Minds by Elvis Presley. More of the roundup in a minute. Stay close.
Millions of Americans are getting 7-year car loans. The monthly payments are lower, but they can cost thousands of dollars extra in interest. And some buyers wind up spending more than they should.
I wonder that a lot. If the loan had to be 5 years, what I truly have driven off a lot that day.
The rise of the 7-year car loan this afternoon on Always Considered from NPR News. Listen this afternoon from 4 to 8 on WAMU 88.5. Coming up in about 20 minutes on the Politics Hour, D.C. Councilmember Charles Allen joins us to talk public safety, prosecution of hate crimes, and statehood. Plus, Maryland State Senator Clarence Lim wades into the debate over redistricting in Howard County. That's the Politics Hour today from noon on WAMU 88.5 and streaming at kojoshow.org. Support for WAMU comes from Ingleside at Rock Creek, serving the D.C. area. Now taking reservations for its upcoming addition, Creekside, with independent living residences and new memory support assisted living residences. ircdc.org. The Association of American Railroads. A train can move 1 ton of freight over 470 miles on a single gallon of fuel. Freight Rail uses today's technology to make tomorrow more efficient. Learn more at aar.org.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Motley Fool, providing a variety of solutions for individuals' investment portfolios and personal finances. Motley Fool is a resource for investors when buying stocks. Find out more at fool.com. And from C3.ai. C3.ai's software enables organizations to use artificial intelligence at enterprise scale, solving previously unsolvable business problems. Learn more at C3.ai.
We'll get back to the roundup in a moment after a quick heads up about Monday's program. Sex sells, but women often catch heat for being the buyers. Pop culture often treats the lustful desires of men very differently, but the hosts of the podcast First Aid Kit aim to change that. Have you ever felt scrutiny as a woman for openly admiring the objects of your desire? What happened, and how did you respond to it, if at all? Leave us a voicemail, 855-236-1A1A. We'd also love to know who the objects of your thirst are, regardless of your sexual orientation or your gender identity. Which pop culture icons are you lusting over these days, and why? Tell us your story. 855-236-1A1A, or send us an audio file with our app, 1A Vox Pop, and we'll share some of your stories Monday on 1A. Back now to the roundup with Jennifer Williams, Fernando Pizarro, and Abdurrahim Fukara. Let's head now to Iraq, where the protests have intensified. At least 250 protesters have been killed in clashes with security forces since the demonstrations began early last month. Tens of thousands of people have joined the demonstrations to express their grievances against the government. Iraq's President Barham Saleh has now called for a new election law. He's promised Iraqis that he will approve early elections if it passes. He also says Iraq's Prime Minister Adil Abdul Mahdi will resign once a replacement is found. Abdurrahim, what's behind these protests? What do the protesters want?
Well, the economic situation is the engine behind many of the protests going on that have been going on in the Middle East over the last 10, 12 years. And Iraq is obviously no exception, except that Iraq has its own idiosyncrasies as a political system, as a society. Iraq, time ago, used to be a success story in the Middle East. The economy was doing well. Iraqis generally felt very good about themselves and about where the country was going under Saddam, until he decided to go to war against Iran, and then he invaded Kuwait. His country came under sanctions, and then the invasion of 2003. Now, many of the things that are going on now in Iraq basically hark back to what happened in 2003. Before 2003, for a long time, there had always been tensions between the Shia and the Sunnis. In 2003, and there is fierce debate among Iraqis, which is the minority, which is the majority. But the Bush administration in 2003, when it carried out the invasion of Iraq, determined that the Shia were the majority. So it flipped, obviously, the power structure, and all of a sudden the Shia were in power in Iraq, ruling over the Sunnis.
So is the demand from the protesters related to that flip, or is it something else?
It is in some way directed to that flip, because the corruption that they are protesting against is basically about ministries that are stuffed on a sectarian basis with people doing funny things to the economy. And the protesters are saying there's a lot of money that is being siphoned off or misused at a time when we cannot afford food, we cannot afford fuel, we cannot afford education, we cannot afford housing, and so on. So a large part of it is about socioeconomic grievances, but another large portion of it is about politics. Protesters saying we no longer want the Iraqi state to be run on the basis of sectarian politics.
So before we move on to Egypt, this new election law, will that be enough of a concession for protesters, whatever it would do? I mean, Iran has allegedly stepped in to prevent the ouster of Iraq's prime minister. So would this law be enough to satisfy the protesters?
Well, we're already hearing from protesters that it's no. They want the government gone. And, these protests, as we've seen elsewhere, they start with something very small and then they snowball. And many Iraqis are now demanding a change to the entire system, not just the election law, not just the prime minister. They want the whole system, as I said, that was erected in 2003 on sectarian politics. They want that to be changed. And then you have Iran and you have the United States. These are the two major powers in Iraq. Will they consent to that change? That's a big question.
Let's talk Egypt, because the security forces there have expanded the crackdowns. Amid protests there, they targeted journalists, foreigners, even children. The demonstrations broke out in late September. About 4,000 people have been arrested. Human rights activists say that this is the biggest crackdown to take place under the regime of Egypt's current president, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Jennifer, targeting journalists, foreigners, children, what's up with this crackdown? I mean, has it gotten the government what it's wanted through this crackdown?
So here's what you have to understand about Egypt. When you had the Mubarak fall, Hosni Mubarak, during the Arab Spring, that really kicked off something that you see a lot of times in post-revolutionary countries, which is that once the people have seen that a leader can fall, it's a lot easier to see that the next leader can fall, and the next, and the next, which means that Sisi, who took over from Mohamed Morsi in a basically military coup. Mohamed Morsi had been democratically elected, was the first democratically elected president after the fall of Mubarak. Sisi then takes over in a military coup and has been basically the dictator ever since. And what you have to do to stay in power is to crack down harder and harder and harder, because the people are seeing that, that the kings can fall, right? And so, Egypt has a long history, going back here decades and decades, and I would argue probably millennia, actually, of protesting against leaders and toppling leaders. But, Mubarak was in power for a very long time through repression, but he also had the backing of the United States very robustly for counterterrorism. Sisi has tried to essentially follow that same model. He's just somehow more ruthless. I think if you had asked any Egyptian Egypt watcher during the Mubarak era, that, to imagine a more repressive government than Mubarak, they would have been hard pressed to even fathom that, and yet here we are.
And then Mohamed Morsi, and then Abdel Fattah al-Sisi.
Right. So Mohamed Morsi, basically did a not great job politically and economically, and was kind of disliked by pretty much everyone. He wasn't even really supposed to be the Muslim Brotherhood's candidate. He was known as the spare tire.
That's like a year.
Yeah, exactly. So he's kind of ousted, and then Sisi, the strongman, comes in, and he's very much ruling under the model of the Mubarak, of the kind of strongman that we've seen not just across the Arab world, but across the world in general, right? There's a dictator's playbook, and that is crackdown, crackdown, crackdown. Do not allow dissent. You can allow pockets of dissent in certain ways, right? The dissent that helps you, so you can have your regime protesters come out, because that's super helpful. But cracking down, we've seen students rounded up, university students, where previously university students used to be actually than most people allowed to protest in Egypt. So the crackdown is just harder and wider, and that's because you have to do that to maintain control.
One more story out of the Middle East we should touch on, Abdurrahim, and that's in Lebanon. There have been civilian-led protests for just under 2 weeks, and its Prime Minister Saad Hariri resigned on Tuesday. He had been in charge for less than a year. And during his resignation speech, Hariri said, quote, "Today I will not hide it from you. I have reached a dead end. It is time for us to have a big shot to face the crisis," unquote. What does Hariri's resignation mean for Lebanon, and are protesters looking forward to a replacement? What does this mean going forward?
Well, first of all, just as Fernando described the situation in Chile, this originally started off by protests about a 5 cent increase that the government wanted, or tax that the government wanted to impose on the use of WhatsApp. And then it basically snowballed into something very major, very political. Hariri is gone. It's hard to see a new government in Lebanon, despite what the protesters are saying, which does not have Hariri in one capacity or another, because Hariri is Lebanon's bridge to the West. He's Lebanon's bridge to Western money flowing into Lebanon. But the fact that he's resigned, he resigned against the advice of Hezbollah. Well, Hezbollah was not obviously very pleased about that. That now raises the issue of where does Hezbollah go with Lebanon? Where do the protesters go with Hezbollah, knowing obviously that Hezbollah is a strong supporter or an ally of Iran, which has a big stake in Lebanon. Hariri was a big ally of Saudi Arabia, which had a big stake in Lebanon. The French have a big stake in Lebanon. It's so many proxies. Yeah, there are a lot of proxies. Amazing, interesting politics.
There's a new FCC regulation that affects all NPR stations nationwide that says that every Friday we have to talk about Brexit. We'll do that now, because on Tuesday, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, won the backing of Britain's Parliament to hold a general election a few weeks before Christmas. The Prime Minister decided it's time to put the power back in the hands of the British people, which further bedevils the issue of how or if they can leave the EU. Here is Boris Johnson grappling with a tricky metaphor guarding a turkey.
We've got an oven ready deal, put it in the microwave. If you vote for us and we get our programme through, which we will, because as I say, it's oven ready, it's there to go, then we can be out at the absolute latest by January next year.
But many commentators have been quick to point out how badly his main opponent is polling. It's Jeremy Corbyn of the Labour Party. Here he is at his party's campaign launch with a message that sounds a lot like what you hear from Bernie Sanders.
We are going after the tax dodgers. We're going after the dodgy landlords. We're going after the bad bosses. We're going after the big polluters. Because we know whose side we, the Labour Party, are on.
Now, this week, Halloween was supposed to be the do-or-die deadline for Brexit. The president of the European Council, Donald Tusk, tweeted out that the extension has been granted, but he tweeted, quote, "It may be the last one. Please make the best use of this time. I will keep my fingers crossed for you," unquote. Jennifer, I think this some people's fingers gonna break because they've been waiting for a while. You can't cross your fingers for months and months and not have some arthritic. I don't know how this one works. This is not moving.
I think people's fingers are going to be making some different shapes towards the government.
There's going to be some people. Yes.
You feel me? Okay.
Yeah, I do. I see it. Yeah.
So what's going on here, basically? Now, with these elections, it does seem like this kind of crazy, oh dear God, what now in Brexit? But this actually potentially could be the only way to break this deadlock that has been what has actually caused Brexit to be, drawn out over, well over a year for all these months of negotiations. And that fundamental deadlock is that, the Parliament, who is in charge of, agreeing to the deal and implementing the legislation that actually takes the deal and puts it into UK law, which is an entire other step, they themselves have been deadlocked. British politics has been fractured in very strange ways. It's made very odd bedfellows. Even, the Tories, the Conservative Party, is kind of divided amongst itself between the hardcore Brexiteers and the less enthusiastic Brexiters. And so the idea, and the Prime Minister's kind of reasoning behind having these elections is to basically say, look, okay, we're not going to have a second Brexit referendum, but this is kind of going to be that, right? We're not going to officially say, Brexit, yes or no, but that's what this will be. So if you still want Brexit, everyone, come out, vote for a lot of conservatives who are pro-Brexit, put them in Parliament. That way, Boris Johnson, can have a majority. I can actually get done Brexit, and we can move on.
Now, it's worth noting that the last prime minister who said, okay, vote, and if I lose, I'm out of here, was David Cameron from the same party, and they voted, and he's like, let me find some cardboard boxes for my stuff.
Right, yeah, so there's a history of things not going as well as people thought.
Every prime minister who's had to deal with Brexit has been decapitated by it.
Right, absolutely. I think, part of the problem is, again, like you said with Jerry Corbyn, mentioning that he sounds like Bernie Sanders, he is an avowed socialist. That is, his political leaning as self-described. But he's wildly unpopular with most of his party and most people. He has, major problems with anti-Semitism. He's got a lot of issues. And so it's kind of like, well, who do we vote for? You've seen the rise of the Lib Dems, who have become the kind of anti-Brexit party.
The Liberal Democrats.
Right, the Liberal Democrats, sorry. And so you've seen these kind of weird kind of changes in the British political system, but I think an election may be the only way to actually get some sort of resolution.
We should also talk briefly about China and Hong Kong before we go, because the pro-democracy protests have clearly taken a toll. The territory is now in a recession. Its economy shrunk just over 3% during the last quarter. Fernando mentioned the big trade summit being canceled due to the protests in Chile, the APEC summit, and part of that was supposed to involve trade talks between China and the U.S. So where does this leave those talks? Is that still a possibility?
Yeah, that is still a possibility. I mean, when Donald Trump said consistently over the last few weeks that he was going to Chile, that the real important thing for him was this signing what they call the phase one of this U.S.-China trade deal. But U.S. sources are saying that it's still possible, maybe to find another place, maybe in mid-December, because that is the certain deadline for this. But remember, this has been a little bit complicated because the U.S. House of Representatives passed a resolution supporting the protests in Hong Kong.
One last story, a few warm words about the fate of endangered species. The population of mountain gorillas is rising in Rwanda. It was under 700 a decade ago. It's just over 1,000 today. And tourist dollars are actually helping. Groups are paying good money to see them in their natural habitats. The gorillas can be found in a number of places, including the mist-covered dormant volcanoes in Rwanda, Uganda, and Congo. George Schaller is a biologist and gorilla expert. He told the Associated Press that their population is still vulnerable, but their numbers are growing in remarkable ways. Clearly, it's been a busy week around the world. We've met our FCC requirements, as we will probably do every weekend for the rest of the year. And I thank Jennifer Williams, foreign editor for Vox and co-host of Vox's Foreign Affairs podcast, Worldly. Jennifer, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Fernando Pizarro, the Washington correspondent for Univision. Fernando, always a pleasure. Thank you. And Abdurrahim Fukara, the Washington bureau chief for Al Jazeera. Thank you, Abdurrahim. Thank you kindly. Please do check out the 1A podcast. You'll find it wherever you get your podcasts. All the links to listen are online at npr.org/1A. Our senior producers are Danielle Knight and Paige Osborne. You can learn more about our team at the1a.org. This program comes to you from WAMU, part of American University in Washington, distributed by NPR. Until we meet again, I'm Joshua Johnson. Thanks for listening and have a great weekend. This is 1A.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from C3.ai. C3.ai software enables organizations to use artificial intelligence at enterprise scale, solving previously unsolvable business problems. Learn more at C3.ai. From Noom, offering a personalized weight loss program that uses psychology and small goals to change habits, with the goal of losing weight and keeping it off for good. Learn more at Noom, Noom.com. And from the Annie E. Casey Foundation.
Here's to the ladies who lust. Writers Bim Adewunmi and Nicole Perkins are the women behind the podcast First Aid Kit.
It's about pop culture and desire.
I'm presuming that you wax.
Well, no. Are you joking? Wax it? I'm not
Yeah.
waxing that. God, no. We'll explore the first aid kit next time on 1A.
Listen Monday from 11 to noon on WANU 88.5. The National Philharmonic is offering a chance to pair of tickets to the concert Voices of Light on Saturday, November 23rd at Strathmore. More information is at wanu.org/giveaways. Support for WANU comes from the Phillips Collection, featuring Bernard Pivillard, The Intimate Poetry of Everyday Life, the Nami Collection of Vicky and Roger Sam, on view through January 26th. Details at phillipscollection.org. The National Symphony Orchestra. Music director John Andrea Noceda conducts Music of Movement, a dance-inspired program featuring music from Waltz King, Johann Strauss, Duke Ellington, and more. November 7th and 9th. NationalSymphony.org. This is WAMU Washington, your listener-supported NPR news station from American University. In HD at 88.5 at WRAU 88.3 Ocean City and live at WAMU.org. It's 12 o'clock.
Coming up on the Politics Hour, the Nats won the World Series, and we're talking to the mayor who brought the team to Washington. Also, Virginians vote on Tuesday to determine which party controls the state legislature. Did we mention that the Nats won the World Series, and that we're talking about whether the city's investment in Nats Park was worth all that money? We're also talking about crime in the district and the upcoming special election for the late Elijah Cummings House seat in Maryland. But perhaps you haven't heard, the Nats won the World Series, and the players are going to the White House on Monday, and there'll be a parade too, a world championship, and all of that after the news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Turns out job growth didn't slow down as much as experts had expected for the month of October. Employers added 128,000 positions to their payrolls last month, and in reporting on the government's latest monthly assessment of the labor market, NPR's Chris Arnold says the jobless rate rose slightly to 3.6%.
The job gains were much better than expected. The jobs report this month is dealing with a major curveball. General Motors' longest strike since 1970 pushed down the manufacturing job numbers. And in the report, manufacturing lost 36,000 jobs, though exactly how much is due to the strike is hard to say. Clearly, overall job growth in the economy has been slowing down this year over last, but this report was a surprise to the upside. The prior 2 months were revised up by a combined 95,000 jobs. So that has some economists rethinking whether the labor market is healthier than they thought. As for wages, average hourly earnings rose 3% from a year ago. Chris Arnold, NPR News.
The National Weather Service says critical fire conditions persist in Southern California. Wind gusts above 30 miles per hour are fanning a new fire in Ventura County. The Maria fire is less than a day old and has burned more than 8,000 acres. The winds are dying down in Northern California, where the huge Kincaid fire burns north of San Francisco. It's at least 65% contained. And here's Tom Goldman reports evacuation of tens of thousands of people helped.
CAL Fire spokesman Dennis Rain says his agency is very proud that there have been no human fatalities and critical injuries during the Kincaid fire. He says the mandatory evacuations ordered by the Sonoma County Sheriff have made a huge difference in how this fire's been fought.
Number one priority is life safety. But if those folks remove themselves from the equation, then we can go right into property conservation, which is protecting homes and infrastructure from the fire.
Rain says there's no celebrating yet, but officials are optimistic a favorable weather forecast will help firefighters contain even more of the blaze. Tom Goldman, NPR News, Santa Rosa, California.
A forensics team is working to identify all of the 74 victims killed in a train fire in Pakistan yesterday. Dozens of people were injured. NPR's Deep Hadid says as a result, an angry public is calling for the resignation of the country's rail minister.
Newspaper editorials, influential Pakistanis on social media, and opposition figures called for the resignation of Sheikh Rashid Ahmed after he blamed passengers for the railway fire. The fire was caused when a natural gas cylinder exploded while a passenger was cooking breakfast. Critics said it was the responsibility of management to search passengers and confiscate dangerous goods. And the outcry comes as thousands of protesters arrived in Islamabad, demanding the resignation of the government itself over alleged election fraud.
That's NPR's Dia Hadid reporting. From Washington, this is NPR News. A U.S. drone is reported to have been shot down in Yemen. The spokesman for the Houthi rebels tweets that a spy aircraft called Scan Eagle was conducting hostile activities when it was brought down near Yemen's border with Saudi Arabia. The drone's presence in the region has not been independently verified. The U.S. has long utilized drones in operations targeting suspected members of al-Qaeda on the Arabian Peninsula. The United States also supports the Saudi-led war against Houthi rebels who are backed by Iran. Scientists say they've begun to explore the genetic diversity of Africa by examining people's genomes. NPR's Richard Harris reports on a study focusing on 25 villages in Uganda.
Most genetic medical tests are based on data primarily collected from Europeans. There's much richer genetic diversity across Africa. Studying that provides more information in general about human beings and more information that could be especially valuable to understand disease among people in Africa. An international research team reports in the journal Cell that they've studied genomes of 6,400 individuals from Uganda. That's a tiny sample of African ancestry compared, for example, with 500,000 people who are in a UK biobank, but it's a start. The scientists say their goal is not only to understand genetics underlying heritage and disease, but to help develop scientific capacity in Africa. Richard Harris, NPR News.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average has risen nearly 1%, or 252 points since the open. It's at 27,298. I'm Lakshmi Singh, NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include C3.ai. C3.ai software enables organizations to use artificial intelligence at enterprise scale, solving previously unsolvable business problems. Learn more at C3.ai.
It's 12:06. You're listening to WAMU 88.5. I'm Jerry Mitchell. On the next Fresh Air, we listen back to an interview with film producer Robert Evans, who died Saturday. Evans challenged Hollywood in the 1960s by hiring young writers and directors like Roman Polanski. Join us today at 1 for Fresh Air on WAMU 88.5. It's 50 degrees under clear skies in Northwest Washington.
It's the Politics Hour. I'm not Kojo Levy. I'm Mark Fisher from the Washington Post. Sitting in for Kojo, Tom Sherwood is here. He's our resident analyst and contributing writer for Washington City Paper. Tom, I am given to understand that the Nats won the World Series.
I heard something happened. I was going to check the New York Times to see what happened. Just didn't feel good about covering that. It was a terrific time. I got to go to all the playoff games, and I was watching the games. It was terrific.
And we'll be talking momentarily with former Mayor Anthony Williams about the Nats and them coming to town in the first place. But there's all this talk always about how world championships paper over our partisan divide. Is that true?
I don't think anything's papered over these days with social media. I do think that the Nats have taken the place of the Washington football team that was often seen as a unifying aspect of this region, and I think because of the team's horrible record, because of its criticized name, I think that they have faded, and the Nats are stepping in for this entire region. The Washington Business Journal did a very long story online I read, one of the longest stories I've ever read in the Business Journal, about what it's meant for the entire region. It's not just the District of Columbia, it's the entire region.
Absolutely. We'll be talking later this hour with Clarence Lamb, a Democrat, Maryland State Senator who is representing Baltimore and Howard counties. We'll also have here in studio Charles Allen, the Democratic D.C. council member representing Ward 6. But first, we're going to talk to the former mayor of the District of Columbia, Anthony Williams, a mayor from 1999 to 2007. He is chief executive of the Federal City Council, and more germane to our discussion today, he's the mayor who can lay claim to having brought the baseball team back to Washington. Mayor, welcome.
Very happy to be with you. Thank you, Mark.
So the team that
And
you,
I say hi to my councilman, I live in District, so hi to Councilman Allen.
hello, Mr. Mayor.
Hey, what about me? How about hello to Sherwood?
Yeah, Tom, I could, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, there's also that. So the team that you fought so hard to bring to the district has now won the World Series. This is the Holy Grail. Tell me you saw this coming when you were first talking to Major League Baseball about bringing a team there.
No, I didn't, I thought it was, and we talked about this, we thought it was important to have the team, we thought it was a great investment for the district. Both the civic spirit, the economic benefits from the team, that we would be importing revenue from outside the city, by bringing a fan base to DC, all those things. I really thought that we would have a championship caliber team when the Mariners bought the team and they made the decisions they made. Now, how soon we would be in a World Series, like a lot of people, I was sometimes often skeptical, but it's fantastic. It's great.
You know, you were, I wrote in my city paper story that you were a long-time St. Louis Cardinals fan, and of course the Nats swept the Cardinals to get to the World Series. Any mixed emotions there? Any lingering support for St. Louis that you would dare to admit?
You know, the St. Louis, old man Bush, St. Louis built a dynasty. They were a great team, but they can't hog all the championships. So I didn't feel that bad for St. Louis. But, I've always loved that team. But talk about the Nets now, man. Everybody's got to have one team. You got to make a choice. And the Nets, I love the Nets. They're great. I'm not just, hey, look, I'm a season ticket holder. I go to every game I can go to, so I think I can say that with conviction and with no signs of embarrassment.
So take us back to 2004 and the bitter battle over stadium funding. This was the threshold question that would determine whether baseball would come back to Washington after 33 years in the wilderness. You can tell us, did you at any point in that bitter battle believe that the deal was dead?
Yeah, there was times where I thought the deal was, I don't know when it was on life support. I knew that the deal was in trouble. Jerry Reinsdorf invited him to the concert chamber.
The owner of the Chicago White Sox.
The owner of the Chicago White Sox representing Major League Baseball, getting a dressing down. For some of the council members, I thought, oh my God, this is going sideways. This isn't going in the right direction. I will say that Councilman Allen's great predecessor, Sharon Ambrose, was always a supporter. So, she wasn't one of them. But yeah, there were some council members who really thought that there was an either or. We were going to do the stadium and rob our schools and our other human services to support, or we do the right thing by people and deny all these oligarchs, this kind of like a pleasure trip. I think clearly, as it turned out, we have the resources both to do the investment in sports and entertainment, which has paid off. And as I was saying to someone earlier, shortly after we did the stadium, we embarked on a magnificent, and I totally support it, school modernization plan. It's not like that money just turned up. We always had that money available. We just didn't make a good enough case to people that those funds were already in place to do school modernization.
Mr. Mayor, you said that to a number of groups that without the money of development, you can't have the money for the social service needs and education needs. There's still a
right. I'm criticized by people for transportation and mobbing services for people in need. But if you look at budgets for all of our human service agencies, including starting the move to now get them all out of receivership, I'm just saying it started during my time. So yes, these funds went to places where they were needed. We went out there, we got the field ready, we planted the crops, we harvested the crops, and people were better off. To use a farm analogy.
So,
Tony Williams. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, let me ask you, knowing that it was very controversial, the city paid, initially was going to spend $400 million.
Go ahead, yeah. I understand my exact wrong. Go ahead.
I know you're some family of it. Initially, it was going to be about a $400 million stadium, but with all the work and everything, it was closer to $800 million. Councilmember Jack Evans has said that the Washington football team want to come back and build its own stadium there. Under what conditions would you want to see that team rebuild at RFK? What would be the city's investment in your view? Would it be worth it? And a council member here is opposed to having this football team come back. But what would you say Would you want to see, you tried in 1999, you said you wanted to bring the Skins back to DC. What would you do to make that happen?
I think now there'd be a number of different things. Obviously, the name is in contention. That has to be worked out. Another, you've got to look at the economics and satisfy, as we did with council, that the economics make sense. That's the burden that, yeah, has to be borne by the proponents. And undeniably, it's harder when instead of talking about 80 or so home games, you're talking about 8.
So, Mayor Williams, the Washington Post was reporting this morning that the Nationals are going to the White House on Monday to meet with President Trump. There have been about 20 sports championships since Trump took office. About 10 of those teams have declined to go to the White House or have been disinvited when it turned out that some players didn't want to be seen with the president. The Red Sox went, but a number of their players refused. The Astros went, but some of their stars skipped the meeting. The same thing with the Capitals. What would you advise the Nationals to do in this instance?
I think that the Nationals who are going to the White House are going there because they received the invitation from the president, and I respect that. But I respect players who decide they don't want to go.
Would you go?
But that's how I feel. You know?
Would you go?
I'm not a player, so I can't say.
Well, you know, the learners, you mentioned the learners they've done. They did that. President Trump came on Sunday night and the president was gone, but the learners did invite him. Major League Baseball invited him. The learners chose not to get involved with all that and did not invite him.
I mean, I don't want to, look, I'm here to talk about the Nationals, not talk about, I just think that, when we talk about normally, clearly norms have been broken out, so back in the day, people wouldn't have, I mean, people always fool politicians.
Hmm.